High in the mountains of northern New Mexico, between Santa Fe and Taos, lies a most unique land. These are the villages held in the embrace of La Jicarita Mountain, small enclaves settled by Pueblo Indians and Spanish and Mexican explorers centuries ago. Today, the descendants of settlers, explorers, and indigenous people of southern Taos County live here in harmony with the traditions and customs passed down from generation to generation. A proud people whose roots are deep in the land they love and have a foothold in both the modern world and the history of their rich culture and heritage. These are the people of the Rio Lucio, Chamasal, and many other small villages surrounding Peñasco, New Mexico.
Well, good afternoon, and here I am again. I thought I would start out by, a few of you may know me, but I've been gone for so long that I would give you a little bit of who I am. I am actually, my dad and my mom had 13 children, and I'm right in the middle. And I graduated from Peñasco High School, went on into Highlands and got my BA there, and then moved to the area around Las Cruces, to a tiny little place, actually smaller than Peñasco, and I've taught there for the Gadsden school districts for 29 years. After that, I moved into Connie, that is not much bigger, and on the side, and I taught there. I taught for 29 years in Peñasco and in Gadsden, and then I moved to Canutillo and taught for 18 more years. So that was 48 years. I taught every grade level from Head Start to 9th grade. I was an ESL teacher. I taught for 12 years. Actually, my job was the coordinator of the bilingual program, and I worked mostly with getting teachers, helping teachers to do a better job. So that's kind of a history of what I've done. I was always kind of interested in the medicine that my dad did, but for some reason or other, I really didn't follow that. However, I was, one of my granddaughters did get interested. She said, "Tell me some more things about my grandpa. Tell me more things about him." And I would tell her. And even though she's 26 now, this year she finished her first year of medical school. And in fact, I was a little worried and I didn't put things together as well as I could have and should have. And I'm a procrastinator anyway by heart. I have to tell you that. But she had to go for an internship to Guatemala, to the jungles of Guatemala for 2 weeks. And there is a probability, we are very positive, so we're saying no, but it did get us nervous. She may have been bitten by a bat. And she came back to the States, and they're giving her all the medication and everything that she needs in mega doses, just in case. So we are positive, and we're saying no, it's not, it's a spider or something like that. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of background on myself. And so now I will concentrate on telling you some of the things about my father. That man in Peñasco that was known by many of the older generation by El Doctorcito. They respected him and liked him, and he did so very much to help the community. Later on, I will tell you what some of the younger generation did and what happened to them when they changed the stories a little bit. Okay? So I'll be sharing a brief history of Florencio Martinez, my dad, with a primary focus on what he did during his life here in Peñasco. I will relate the events in my dad's life as I remember them, or even more as my brother David, because he has quite a memory, and my brother Joe have told me. And then Mary also gave me a lot of information. Some of the points I'm going to tell you about, you may think there's a little bit of contradiction in what they both believe, so I'll tell you what they each think, and then maybe somebody in the audience might even know. And there were other individuals who kindly shared some of their information and experiences with me. As a matter of fact, I just finished talking to a gentleman Mr. Romero, I believe was his name. I'll tell you about what he told me just a minute ago over there. In most instances, I will not name the individuals involved because the particular situation of what they did and then why they had to go to my dad to get help may be a little bit personal. And I did not want to embarrass anybody by what I was having to say. Okay? Joe told me that my paternal grandfather, Jose Eusebio Martinez, and his wife, my grandma Bersabe Griego, that they lived in Chamizal. And here's one of those little contradictory things. My brother Joe says, no, we have a lot of relatives in Chamizal, and I know that they came from Chamizal. But my sister Mary says, no, they came from Trampas. And so I really don't know exactly what it is, but I tend to believe my brother Joe and that they did start out in Chamizal. Joe told me that my paternal grandfather, Jose Eusebio Martinez, and his wife, Grandma Bersabe Griego Martinez, lived in Chamizal for a short time, and then they moved to Trinidad, Colorado, where my dad grew up. I understand he was quite a handful, and I truly believe that simply because I taught, that's another thing I did. I taught the gifted and talented for a few years, and if any of you had anything to do with the gifted and talented students, they are a handful. They tend to be, want to do things out of the box and out of the ordinary and things like that. And because of this, my dad left home, and here's another contradiction. My brother says that my dad left his home when he was 13 years old. And my sister, Mary, says that he left home when he was 11 years old. Apparently, he just was hard to handle and had something with his mom. And he said, I'm leaving. And he did. He just left home. And you know, he roamed around in different places for a while. Came home occasionally to visit, but most of the time he just was a wanderer. And I have two pictures over there that show when he was much older, but when he was still wandering around the world. He was a wanderer at heart, and he wandered for several years, traveling through different states. And he worked along different things, learning as he explored his world. You know, he went to many of the different states and to Mexico and to just many different places. And his favorite mode of travel was to jump the train as a hobo. And at one time he decided, you know, this is getting old, having to jump the train all the time to go, go anywhere. So his other brother, Uncle John, used to work as a cook on the train. And he said, okay, I can get you a job as a dishwasher. And Dad said, well, all right, that way I can ride the train and I don't have to be jumping it. So he was a dishwasher, and he helped the chef, and a chef helper on the train, and he went from Chicago to New York. As he did this just for the experience of riding the train without having to jump the train. And I remember he always used to talk about St. Louis, Missouri. He remembered that he would light up as he talked about his adventures in St. Louis, and he said, one day I'm going to have to go back there. It is my dream to get back there one of these days. You know, unfortunately, he had 10 children to support. Life was hard, and he never did get back to St. Louis, Missouri. But he had adventures in many of the different states, and where he talked about were, for example, in Texas. He says, you guys just keep away from Texas. He says, you have no business going down there. His adventures in Texas were not very pleasant. He would tell us that in Texas they actually had signs that said, Mexicans, don't let the sun go down on you. He said this was not a good place to be at, so he moved on to explore Mexico, which was much friendlier for him. He wandered and explored and learned and got life experiences that would serve him very well later in life. So then later in Peñasco, Dad came to Peñasco one day. His wandering adventures landed him here in this little tiny place, back close to where his parents were born. He would tell us that he saw this beautiful lady, or young girl, that would come into Peñasco in the evenings and ride out in the mornings in this white palomino. He would call it a white palomino horse. And he said, I fell in love with the horse. I'm sorry, he said, no. I fell in love with your mom right away. and he said, I really did fall in love with her at first sight, not with a palomino. He came in second. And another one of the contradictions is that my sister Mary says, my mom used to teach school. You know, when they went to school and were good students, and she was in the 8th grade when she finished school. And she was really pretty intelligent, and so she became a teacher. And Mary, my sister, says that she used to have to get up in the morning, on Sunday evening, she would get on her palomino and go to El Valle, and she would stay with the family there for the week and teach school. And then she would come back on Friday, and this was her routine. And she told me that actually, my sister lives in Utah, that there was a friend there that would say that my mom used to stay with them at El Valle. However, my brother Joe says, nope, it was not El Valle. She taught El Ojito. And that's right over the mountain. And she used to ride in every morning and back every day. So one of them, I don't know which one of them, but one of them has got to be correct. And after a short time, my dad and my mom got married. My dad was 27, and my mom was 17, a very young bride. So she gave up the job she loved and came to stay at home. But you know, my mom's love for teaching never failed. I'll interject something here. I remember so well that at the back of the stove, they would put, I don't know, I think it might be dangerous, but I think it was a wood stove, and they would put the wood there, and actually on the walls, my mom would have newspapers, but they were written in Spanish, and I was very, very young, but she taught me. Using those same newspapers is what she used to teach me how to read Spanish. And even she would say, you know, this will help you with your English reading too. I was very fortunate because my mom could speak English and Spanish, and she had a bit of an accent in English, but she could speak very well. And my dad he grew up well, who knows, around the world, and he spoke mostly English, but of course he knew all his Spanish too. But he didn't even have an accent. He was his first language. He used as his first language English, and so I was very fortunate that I grew up with both languages. Dad's adventure, El Lencho, El Doctorcito, he was known as Lencho by his brothers, El Doctorcito by the community, and Chief by his friends, because he also became very good friends with the Native Americans right here at the Pueblo, and he would spend a lot of time with them learning their ways and their medical studies and things like that. And so began the adventures of my dad, Florencio Martinez, known as Lencho, El Doctorcito, and Chief in the community of Peñasco and surrounding areas. Dad was a very intelligent, resourceful, creative, and skilled man. As I continue to relate some of the events in this life, you will say why I say this, and I think you will agree with me. My dad was very playful, witty, and liked to do a lot of teasing. He was strict with his children, but he loved his children and grandchildren more than life itself. There's nothing he would not have done for us. Although, you know, like in olden times, it's amazing. You know, they controlled us kids by a look. You know, if you came in to do anything you weren't supposed to, they would just look at you, you stopped. And that was the end of it. None of this, but why or por qué or qué vamos a hacer. He was also human, very much so, like everyone has things that their faults. And but he was a good man who served many of Peñasco's people surrounding area and as far into Colorado. People would hear about him from Colorado and would actually come by. I will recount some of the events in his life that will cover parts of his life journey for individuals from birth to death. You know, he influenced or had something to do, can you just imagine, all the way from the time you were born till after you were dead, and he had an influence in how you lived your life. El doctorcito, as el doctorcito de Peñasco, he cared for the pregnant women before they gave birth to the child. And then he would be the midwife who took care of them when they gave childbirth. And after he delivered the child, he would he would take care of the mother and the child if they happened to get sick along the way during their lifetime. And he also played the role of dentist and pulled people's teeth when necessary. I remember he used to have this maroon-like chair, and I remember that it had these little golden buttons along the sides of the arms like this, and it had the flat thing that you stand on, and it would twirl around. We would love to go there and use it as a merry-go-round, and of course they would get angry with us. As a matter of fact, Paulette, not this year because I didn't hear it, but Paulette last night when she was telling her story, she says, I remember going over to visit your dad to get information, but one of the main things, I would even fake toothaches so that I could go and sit in that chair that your dad had for taking care of pulling teeth or taking care of your teeth. The man, someone outside just a minute ago, I can't remember the names now, he told me, oh, I remember when I had una postemia, and that an infection of a tooth, right? And we had to go to see your dad. We wanted him to pull the tooth out, and your dad said, oh no, you have an infection, you cannot pull a tooth out when you have an infection like that. He said, we've got to bring that down. So he gave him a piece of clove to put on it till he could get rid of the infection before he could pull the tooth out. If they happened to die, he used his skills as a Finnish carpenter, because that was his job during the time that he worked at Los Alamos. He was a Finnish carpenter, so he used those skills to make their coffins. Then after they were buried, he used his skills as a cement plasterer to make their camas, their cement beds, or their monumentos, their monuments, or headstones. Okay. And of course, that's why my dad had so many different jobs and did so many different things. I mean, can you just imagine having to support and really take care of 10 kids? And my dad, he always took good care of us. We were poor, but we never went hungry, and we were never cold, and we never had any of those things that would happen like that. I remember my sister always says, you know what, if Dad had only gotten paid for all his work and everything like that, we'd be rich and not poor anymore, But, everyone in the community was just as poor, and my dad believed seriously that if you had a gift, you had to share it. And so he did. There was a woman, I remember one night, late at night, because our house had 3 rooms like this and then a little kitchen in the back and stuff like that. And we had 3 double beds, one like there, one here, we all crowded in there. There were so many of us. And my dad and mom's room was on this side over here, and he had this big long table. It was a dark brown table that had drawers like this on it, but we could never go there and touch them because that was my dad's medical table and stuff. So we had to stay totally away from there. Then it had a corner over there where he had his dentist chair, right? And then that was Mom and Dad's bedroom. There was a bed in there. And you could hear from their room to our room. And I remember one late night when we had gone to bed, and my dad, and I heard this man knocking on the door, and very insistently knocking on the door. And so my dad woke up and he went to answer the loud knock on the door. And I wish I could tell you who it was, but I was a little girl and I don't remember who it was. But I know I was there. I heard it and it was a part of it. I just remember that a young male voice said to Dad, Don Florencio, vengo a pedirle un favor. Mr. Martinez, I come to ask you for a favor. My mother is very, very sick. There's no hope for a cure for her. We have just brought her home from the hospital. We took her to the hospital. They were well-to-do. We took her to the hospital because the doctors told us to bring her home, to die, that it would be better for her to die at home, that she'd be more comfortable. They said that she would die more at peace here with her family, but my mom keeps insisting that we call you. She wants you to go see her, to see what you can do for her. We know and expect that she will die, but I would like to grant her this last wish. Excuse me. This last wish and request. Will you please come to see her? My dad said, how can I refuse? I will come to see what I can do. You say that I can't do anything, but I will grant you that wish. We cannot deny a dying soul a last request. So Dad went to the medical table that was in Mom and Dad's bedroom, prepared his little bag of whatever he had or whatever he uses, and what they were, I don't know, but then he went out with a young man and was gone for 2 days. I think that it was 2 days. When he returned, he was exhausted. And when Mom asked him what had happened, did she die? Dad said, no, pero Dios dirá. Only God can tell. He said she did not die. He continued to treat her, and as time went by, she got well. In fact, she came to our house to give my mom her condolences right after Dad's funeral. My brothers Joe and David remember something similar to this happening. David thinks it was a very well-to-do family that lived up near Tres Ritos, and David says that the woman's husband wanted to give Dad a very generous offer of a piece of land, but that my dad did not feel that he could take advantage of people just because he had been given a gift of being able to do something to heal people. He would always say, for acts given and taken in faith, even a glass of water can heal. Funny, I never knew that Dad was religious in any way because he never went to church. But my brother Joe says that Dad would often go into the bedroom and pray before he worked on a very difficult case. My brother David was always said, though, that Dad did not go to church, but he did believe in God and had a lot of faith. In fact, he said he would always say and believe that in the statement in the Bible that says, the faith of the size of a mustard seed, you can move, with the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Another episode or experience that I remember is my nephew Steve, my oldest sister's son, when he was a little baby. I came home from college. Actually, she was living in Penasco because her husband was gone for another job or something like that. And Stevie was a very young little baby. And I remember witnessing something that happened when my nephew, Steve Romero, was that baby. He would not stop whimpering and crying, and he was just so fussy, and we could tell something was wrong. We would hold him and try to give him a bottle, and he wouldn't take it, but he would cry even more and would not take the bottle even though we knew he was hungry. We did not know what to do and could hardly wait for Dad to come home from Los Alamos, where he was working at that time. And he was a finished carpenter at the lab. When Dad came home, he took one look at him and said, "Se le cayó la mullera." The soft spot at the top of his head has fallen. He washed his hands, got a glass of warm water, and put salt in it. Mom gave him the soft white cloth, and he put it over Steve's head. Then he filled his mouth with the salted water and put it over the soft spot on Steve's head. And he put his 2 forefingers in Steve's mouth up like this, and he began to gently suck until he lifted it and made sure that it stayed there. And he put excuse me, I lost my place. And then he brought Steve's mollera back in place, and Steve took the bottle and had no more problems after that. Another situation was when Clarence, I got permission from Clarence Cordova because he lives in Babito and he's still quite around. Clarence Cordova, when he was a young boy, he came to my dad because he was hit with this terrible, terrible acne type of thing. It not only was on his face, it had traveled down to his chest. It was really, really bad. And his father brought him to see what could be done. And so my dad sent my brother David, and they were about the same age, Clarence and David, and he sent him to go pick the flower of a mustard seed, of a mustard flower, the actual flower. And he brought it and he boiled it, and I don't know, he made something like a paste. I don't know what else he put on it, but he made a paste and he put it all over his chest, and then he put some of that cheese-like cloth, white cloth on him, and he told him to leave it there for a day. And he came back the next day and he took it off, and it was just full of pus. All of that stuff had been sucked out, pulled out, and removed. And Clarence had no problem after that with the acne type thing. That's what Clarence called it, was acne. So, David and actually David, my brother, was the one had to go gather the flower, and Clarence was the one getting help, and they formed a relationship that to this day, they just are really good friends. I remember also, I'm telling you some of the things that I remember. For example, down a little, about two houses down from our house, there was a lady that lived there. Her name was Gravelita Ortega, and she and her children lived there. It was one of the few houses that we were, as children, allowed to go to play with her children. One sad day, my brother David, who was 5 years old, and his friend Henry, who was Gravelita's youngest son, it was so very sad because he died, and he died of typhoid fever. I remember watching as Dad made we were immediately, there was a stop. You will not go there again. I mean, you stay home, and until we say you can go visit, you will not go, because typhoid fever is a very contagious thing. But I do remember my dad making this little coffin, like for a 5-year-old. And I remember it had this flat part here with the angles like this, and then going down like this, and then at the bottom. And I remember that I watched him as he lined that coffin with a cloth, and made it as comfortable, I guess, as he could for little Henry. And these are just the events that I remember. Then these are events that were told to me. For example, there was, just those of you that were at the dance, at the jolly, happy, wonderful dance that we had here Friday night, and enjoyed it so much, it brought so many memories back to me, because we used to go to the dances like that here. And unfortunately, like any time, I guess, you had some people that would have disagreements and would have fights, and their fights were serious, and sometimes they used knives and whatever they did. Anyway, one time after a dance at the Tomas Dance Hall, a man was brought to see my dad because he had been cut across the stomach. Apparently, there were two men that were fighting near the bar, and whatever the disagreement was, there was knives that brought out, and one of them was cut across the stomach, and the other one took off. But the one that was cut was in serious condition, so they brought him immediately to my dad. They picked him up and they brought him over to the house. So when Dad heard what was happening, he said, "Bring him in." And the only thing that they could put him in was on Dad's medical table, so that was cleared up and sterilized, and they put him on there, because the cut went from one side of the stomach to the other. And fortunately, the intestines, the innards, they were out, kind of almost like falling out from the movement, but they were not cut. They were not injured. So my dad did, they were actually falling out and everything like that, but my dad sterilized the whole area like that, and sterilized his needle and whatever things he used for, and sewed the big cut back up again together. And the man came back for my dad could check it and do whatever he did, but it left a long scar, but he got well. And my dad always told him, well, that scar will show you as a reminder never to get involved with things like that. I hope you've learned your lesson. Another thing that I do remember for myself, time-wise, am I okay? Oops, I'm past time. I'm past my time?
Just wrap it up and you're great.
Okay. I did want to share this one on my mom. My mom I remember my poor mom being in such tremendous pain in her legs that she, at one time in her life, that she could hardly move. And she was a woman who worked very, very hard, and that my dad would not take care of her. He would just send her. There was a little bus that would run right across the street from the theater, and that would run to the house, and he would tell her to go, and they would go there. My mom would get up in the morning, get on the bus, go to Taos. They would give her a pain shot. She would come back, and the next day she was in pain again. So she finally told him, she said, I'm not going to go there anymore. That's all they do to me, and I'm back again at the same time. I don't understand you. You take care of everybody around the valley in Peñasco, but you won't take care of me. What does that mean? What are you trying to do? What is happening here? So you either take care of me, or you'll see me die in pain. And so my dad said, well, I didn't know that you really wanted me to treat you and to pay attention to you. And I remember so well that my dad got this container with lard. I remember it was white lard. And my dad was really good at iodine, And I remember as he poured this iodine into there, and he started twirling around with his wooden stick, and the iodine started, coloring up all of the lard and everything like that. And then he was going to put something else in there, and he chased me away. So I couldn't see what it was that he put in there, but it made a big paste. And so what he said, this thing will burn your skin. So we used to have what we call las medias, the old-fashioned thick stockings. And he told her, put one of these on, and this will protect your skin. And then he just plastered her whole leg with that stuff, and he bound that up with one of those expandable big thick bandages like that. And he said, all right, keep this on. You know that he gave her that treatment about 3 times, and my mom never got to have pain on her leg. Oh, Charlotte, that would be something for you to know. And my mom never suffered from that pain again. It was just absolutely great and wonderful. And I'm sorry, I started late, or I circulated too long away, or... Okay, all right. So, there were things that he did. I remember when he had to cure I got an ingrown toenail. He was so gentle and kind when he was treating me like that, because I was just a little girl, and he had to take care of that for me. My dad worked, I have to just share one more thing. Later in life, he became the truant officer at the school. And he took his job very seriously, like always. And so when a child would not go to school, he would go to their house, and he would ask for the child. And one person was telling me, were you the one that was telling me that actually he would go into the house, and he would say, where's the sick child? And they would say, here she is, or he would go over there, take their temperature, check them out, and see, okay, you're sick, yes, she's sick, she can stay. Or he would say, he's not sick, send him to school, he's got to go to school, And because of this, that's where I was going to come in again. El doctorcito was for the old people who really appreciated what they did for him, but the younger kids, then he was a truant officer that used to be, and they gave him the name Dr. Cat, of all things. And my youngest sister and my older brother were also in school. So there was a bully, one little guy that was a kind of bully, and he would go over there and he would tease them, and you think this and that because your dad, he's a Dr. Cat or whatever, you know how bullies can be. And then that big old bully got sick, and his dad took him to my dad. And my dad had to take care of him and cure him. So then Tina, being Tina, when she went back to school, he says, okay, so you say my dad is Dr. Cat? All right, I will let everybody know that you had to go to Dr. Cat, and Dr. Cat got to go well. So, that took care of all the name calling and all of that. So I've had a million stories to tell you. I'm sorry I did not get to all of them, but I really appreciate your listening to what I had to say. Thank you very much.